The bullet had grazed her shoulder just as the first snowflakes began to fall, and Zara Pemberton knew with absolute certainty that Silas Vaughn would not stop hunting her until she was dead. She pressed her hand against the wound, feeling the warmth of blood seep through her fingers as she stumbled through the narrow alley behind the Mercantile in Shoshone City, Idaho. The year was 1881, and the November cold was settling into the mountain valley with merciless efficiency. Her breath came in ragged gasps, creating small clouds in the frigid air as she tried to think past the pain and terror coursing through her veins. 3 months ago, she had witnessed Silas murder a prospector in cold blood over a disputed mining claim, and now he was determined to silence the only person who could testify against him. The snow was falling harder now, thick flakes that stuck to her dark hair and the shoulders of her worn wool coat. Zara ducked behind a stack of barrels, her heart hammering so loudly she feared it would give away her position. She could hear boots crunching through the gathering snow on the main street, deliberate and unhurried. Silas knew she was wounded. He knew she could not run forever. "Miss Pemberton," his voice called out, sickeningly pleasant. "No need to make this harder than it has to be. Come out, and I'll make it quick." She bit down on her lip to keep from making a sound tasting blood. The wound in her shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, and she was growing dizzy from blood loss. She needed help, but who in this town would stand against Silas Vaughn? He had money, influence, and a reputation for ruthlessness that kept most people from crossing him. The sound of boots grew closer, and Zara knew she had to move. She pushed herself away from the barrels and ran, her vision swimming as she careened around the corner of the building. The snow was falling so heavily now that visibility was reduced to mere yards. She could barely see where she was going, but that might work in her favor if it also obscured Silas's view. Her foot caught on something, and she went down hard, crying out despite her best efforts to stay silent. The pain in her shoulder exploded into white-hot agony, and for a moment she thought she might pass out right there in the snow. Strong hands suddenly gripped her arms, and she struggled weakly, certain that Silas had found her. "Easy now, easy," a deep voice said, and she realized it was not Silas holding her. "You're hurt bad." She looked up through the swirling snow into a face she had seen around town but never properly met. Russell Owens was a ranch hand who worked at the Double J spread about 10 miles outside Shoshone City. He was in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of mountain stone. His face was weathered from years of outdoor work, with strong features that might have been carved from the same granite as the Sawtooth Mountains that surrounded the valley. "Please," Zara gasped, clutching at his shirt with her good hand. "He's trying to kill me. Silas Vaughn. I saw him murder someone, and now he wants to make sure I never testify." Russell's expression hardened, and he glanced over his shoulder toward the main street. "Can you ride?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The world was tilting dangerously, and she fought to maintain consciousness. "You're going to have to try," Russell said firmly. He scooped her up in his arms as though she weighed nothing, and she found herself pressed against the solid warmth of his chest. Through the haze of pain, she registered the smell of leather and horses and something clean like pine. "My horse is just around the corner. We need to move fast." He carried her swiftly through the falling snow to where a large bay gelding stood waiting, its reins loosely tied to a hitching post. Russell lifted her into the saddle with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her securely against him, and she felt an unexpected sense of safety despite the dire circumstances. "Hey!" Silas's voice rang out behind them, sharp with anger. "Stop right there, Owens. That woman is a wanted criminal, like hell she is, Russell muttered. He kicked the bay into motion and the horse leaped forward with powerful strides. Zara heard the crack of a gunshot, then another, but Russell was already urging the horse into a full gallop down the snowy street. She closed her eyes and held on, trusting this stranger with her life because she had no other choice. They rode hard through the gathering storm, leaving Shoshone City behind. The snow was coming down in sheets now, and Zara could feel herself slipping in and out of consciousness. Russell's arm tightened around her each time she started to sag, and his voice kept pulling her back from the edge. "Stay with me," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "We're almost there. Just hold on a little longer." She tried to focus on his words, on the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them, on anything but the burning pain in her shoulder. Time seemed to lose all meaning. She was vaguely aware when they left the road and began climbing into rougher terrain. The snow muffled all sound except for the horse's labored breathing and the creaking of the saddle. Finally, Russell brought the horse to a stop. Through the white curtain of snow, Zara could make out the dark shape of a small cabin nestled against the mountainside. Russell dismounted and carefully lifted her down, then carried her toward the door. He had to shift her weight to open it, and then they were inside, out of the biting wind and snow. The cabin was dark and cold, but it was shelter. Russell laid her on a narrow bunk against one wall, then moved quickly to light a lantern. Golden light flared, pushing back the shadows, and Zara could see that the cabin was small but well-maintained. There was a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves stocked with supplies and little else. "This is a line shack," Russell explained as he knelt beside the fireplace and began building a fire. "We use it during spring and fall when we're moving cattle through the high country. It's not much, but it's warm and dry." "Thank you," Zara whispered. "You didn't have to help me." "Yeah, I did," Russell said simply. The fire caught, flames licking hungrily at the kindling, and he turned his attention to her. "Now let's take a look at that shoulder. I need to get your coat off." Zara nodded, biting her lip against the pain as Russell helped her sit up enough to ease the coat off. Her dress underneath was dark with blood, and she saw his jaw tighten when he saw the extent of the damage. "Bullet went through," he said after a careful examination. "That's good. Means I don't have to dig it out. But you've lost a lot of blood, and I need to clean and bandage this properly." He moved to the shelves and pulled down a bottle of whiskey, some clean rags, and a small tin that contained needle and thread. Zara watched him through half-closed eyes, trying to focus on his face instead of what was coming next. "This is going to hurt," Russell warned as he settled beside her on the bunk, the supplies arranged within easy reach. "I know," she said softly. He poured whiskey over the wound and the world exploded into pain. Zara cried out, unable to stop herself, and Russell's free hand found hers, gripping tightly. "I'm sorry," he said, and she could hear genuine regret in his voice. "I'm so sorry." He worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning the wound thoroughly before stitching it closed. Zara focused on his hand holding hers, on the rough calluses that spoke of years of hard work, on the strength and steadiness of his grip. When he finally tied off the last stitch and began wrapping her shoulder with clean bandages, she felt tears streaming down her face. "All done," Russell said gently. He helped her lie back against the pillow, then pulled a heavy quilt up over her. "You need to rest now. Your body needs time to heal." "He'll come looking for me," Zara said, fear making her voice shake. "Silas won't give up. He has too much to lose if I testify." "Let me worry about that," Russell said. He pulled one of the chairs over beside the bunk and sat down, his rifle resting across his knees. "You're safe here, I give you my word." "Why are you doing this?" she asked, studying his face in the firelight. You don't even know me." Russell was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. "I know Silas Vaughn," he said finally. "I know the kind of man he is. A few years back, he tried to run my family off our land so he could expand his mining operations. When my father refused to sell, Silas had our barn burned down. We lost most of our livestock, and my father nearly died trying to save the horses." "I'm sorry," Zara whispered. "We rebuilt," Russell continued. "But it taught me something about men like Silas. They think they can do whatever they want because they have money and power. They think there's no one who will stand up to them." He met her eyes, and she saw a fierce determination there. "Well, they're wrong." The combination of blood loss, exhaustion, and the warmth of the fire was pulling Zara inexorably toward sleep. She fought against it, still afraid, but Russell seemed to sense her struggle. "Sleep," he said softly. "I'll keep watch. You're safe, Zara. I promise." It was the first time he had used her given name, and somehow that small intimacy made her believe him. Her eyes drifted closed, and she let herself sink into the darkness. When Zara woke, pale winter light was filtering through the cabin's single window, and the smell of coffee filled the air. She stirred, immediately regretting the movement as pain lanced through her shoulder. A soft groan escaped her lips before she could stop it. "Easy," Russell said, appearing beside the bunk with a cup of coffee. "Don't try to move too fast." She accepted the coffee gratefully, using her good arm to push herself into a more upright position. Russell had wedged additional blankets behind her to create a backrest, and she leaned against them with relief. "How long did I sleep?" she asked. "Most of the night and into the morning," Russell replied. He settled back into the chair beside the bunk. "It's about 10 o'clock now. The snow stopped a couple hours ago. Must have dumped about 8 inches. Zara sipped the coffee, feeling the hot liquid warm her from the inside. Now that she was more alert, she could study Russell properly. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes, and she realized he had stayed awake all night keeping watch. "You need to rest," she said. "I'm fine," Russell said, but she could see the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes. "When was the last time you slept?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "Been up since yesterday morning. Had to ride into town to pick up supplies for the ranch." "So over 30 hours, Zara said. "Russell, you can't keep going like this. If Silas does come, you need to be alert." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But only for a few hours. And you wake me if you hear anything unusual, understand? I promise." Russell stretched out on the floor near the fire, using his saddle as a pillow. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Zara watched him, this stranger who had risked his life to save hers, and felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or pain. She had noticed Russell around Shoshone City before, of course. It was a small town, and a man like him was hard to miss. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that spoke of competence and integrity. She had seen him help old Mrs. Chen carry her parcels to her wagon, had watched him break up a fight outside the saloon with words rather than fists, had noticed the respectful way he treated everyone from the Chinese laundry workers to the town mayor. But she had never imagined she would owe him her life. The morning passed slowly. Zara dozed off and on, her body demanding rest to heal. When she was awake, she watched Russell sleep and tried not to think about Silas Vaughn hunting for her through the snowy wilderness. The cabin was warm and peaceful, the crackling fire and Russell's steady breathing the only sounds. It was early afternoon when Russell finally stirred. He sat up, instantly alert, his hand moving to his rifle before his eyes were fully open. When he saw Zara watching him, he relaxed slightly. "Everything quiet?" he asked. "Not a sound except for some birds and the wind," Zara reported, Russell stood and stretched, then moved to the window to look out at the snow-covered landscape. Good. The snow will make it harder for anyone to track us, but it also means we're going to be stuck here for a bit. The trail down the mountain is too dangerous to navigate right now. I'm sorry, Zara said. I've trapped you here. You didn't do anything, Russell said firmly. He turned from the window to look at her. Silas Vaughn is the one who caused this. Don't apologize for being a victim of his violence. His words were matter of fact, but somehow comforting. Zara had spent the last 3 months feeling guilty for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, for seeing something she should not have seen. It was strangely freeing to have someone point out that she was not to blame. Tell me what happened, Russell said, settling back into the chair. If you're comfortable talking about it. Zara took a shaky breath and began. She told him about that day in late August when she had gone for a walk in the hills above town, seeking solitude and fresh air. She had heard raised voices and had foolishly gone to investigate, thinking perhaps someone needed help. Instead, she had witnessed Silas Vaughn arguing with a prospector named Jack Morrison over a mining claim. The argument had escalated, and Silas had pulled his gun and shot Jack Morrison in the chest at point-blank range. I must have made a sound, Zara said, her voice shaking at the memory, because Silas turned and saw me. I ran and he chased me, but I managed to lose him in the woods. When I got back to town, I went straight to the sheriff. Let me guess, Russell said grimly. Sheriff Coleman didn't do anything. He took my statement, Zara said, but he said there was no body, no proof. Silas claimed he had been in town all day and several people backed up his story. The sheriff said without evidence he could not arrest Silas. Because Silas paid those people to lie, Russell said. I assume so, Zara agreed. But a federal marshal was passing through town about 2 weeks ago and I told him what I had seen. He said he would investigate. I think that's when Silas decided he had to get rid of me. The marshal found Jack Morrison's body 3 days ago, exactly where I said it would be. Russell's expression was dark. So Silas is going to hang if you testify, and he knows it. Yes. When is the trial? The marshal said probably after the new year, once he finishes gathering evidence and interviewing other potential witnesses. Zara met Russell's eyes. I have to testify, Russell. Jack Morrison deserves justice, but I'm so afraid. The last words came out as barely more than a whisper, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. She had been holding her fear inside for so long, trying to be brave, trying to stay strong. But now, in this small cabin with this kind stranger, her defenses crumbled. Russell reached out and took her hand gently. It's all right to be afraid, he said. What you're doing takes real courage, but you don't have to face this alone. I meant what I said last night. I'll protect you, whatever it takes. Why? Zara asked, searching his face. You barely know me. This could cost you everything. Russell was quiet for a moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. I told you about what Silas did to my family, he said finally. But what I didn't tell you is that I've spent the last 3 years wishing I had the courage to stand up to him properly, to make him face consequences for what he did. I was only 21 when he burned our barn. I was angry and scared, and I let him get away with it because I didn't know what else to do. He looked at her, and she saw pain and regret in his gray eyes. You're giving me a chance to make that right, he continued. To stand up to a bully and actually make a difference. But more than that, I look at you and I see someone who is willing to risk everything to do the right thing, even when it terrifies you. That kind of courage deserves to be protected. Zara felt tears spill over and run down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Russell squeezed her hand gently, then released it and stood. You need to eat something. Your body needs fuel to heal. Let me see what I can put together. He moved to the shelves and began pulling down supplies. Within minutes, he had beans heating over the fire along with salt pork and hardtack. It was simple fare, but Zara's stomach growled in anticipation. She realized she had not eaten since early yesterday morning. As Russell cooked, they talked. He told her about his family's ranch, the Double J, which was owned by the Jenkins family but where his father worked as foreman. Russell and his younger brother helped with the day-to-day operations, managing a herd of about 300 cattle. It was hard work but honest, and Russell clearly loved it. "There's something about being out on the range," he said, his face lighting up as he spoke. "Just you and your horse and miles of open country, watching the sunrise over the mountains or seeing a calf take its first steps. It gets in your blood." Zara found herself smiling despite everything. "You make it sound beautiful." "It is," Russell said simply. "Hard but beautiful." She told him about her own life, though it was far less idyllic. She had come to Shoshone City 2 years ago after her parents died of influenza, seeking work and a fresh start. She had found employment at the millinery shop, making and selling hats to the town's ladies. It was not glamorous work, but she was good at it, and it paid enough to cover her room and board at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. "Do you have any other family?" Russell asked as he handed her a plate of food. Zara shook her head. "I had a younger sister, but she died when she was only 8. Scarlet fever. After that, it was just me and my parents." "I'm sorry," Russell said quietly. "It was a long time ago," Zara said, though the loss still ached in her chest. "But thank you." They ate in companionable silence, and Zara was surprised by how comfortable she felt with Russell. Perhaps it was the circumstances that had thrown them together, or perhaps it was simply his steady, calming presence. Either way, she found herself relaxing in a way she had not been able to do in months. After they finished eating, Russell checked her bandages and was pleased to see that the bleeding had stopped and there was no sign of infection. He gave her a dose of willow bark tea for the pain, then insisted she rest more. "How long do you think we'll need to stay here?" Zara asked as she settled back against the pillows. "Depends on the weather," Russell said. "If it stays clear, maybe we can head down in a day or two, but we can't go back to Shoshone City. Sela's will be watching for you." "Where will we go?" "Boys City," Russell said decisively. "It's about 100 miles west, but it's big enough that we can lose ourselves in the crowds while we wait for the trial. And the territorial marshal's office is there. We can put you under official protection." The thought of being truly safe, of having the law actively protecting her instead of looking the other way, made Zara want to weep with relief. "That sounds wonderful. It's going to be a hard journey," Russell warned, "especially with you still healing, but I think it's our best option." "I trust you," Zara said, and she meant it. Russell's expression softened. "Get some rest. I'm going to step outside and check on my horse, make sure he's settled for the night." After he left, Zara lay in the warm cabin and thought about how drastically her life had changed in the span of 24 hours. Yesterday morning, she had been alone and terrified, certain she was going to die. Now she was injured but safe, protected by a man who had every reason to let her problems pass him by, but had chosen to help anyway. She thought about Russell's hands, so careful and gentle as he tended her wound. She thought about the determination in his voice when he promised to protect her. She thought about the way he had held her hand when she confessed her fear, offering comfort without judgment. Zara had not allowed herself to think about romance in years. After her parents died, survival had been her only focus. But lying here now, warm and safe, she could not stop the small flutter in her chest when she thought about Russell Owens. She told herself sternly that it was just gratitude, that she was being foolish. But when Russell came back inside, stamping snow from his boots and bringing a gust of cold air with him, and when he smiled at her with genuine warmth, she felt that flutter again and knew it was something more. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended sort of peace. The weather remained cold but clear, and Russell pronounced the trail down the mountain safe enough for travel. However, Zara's shoulder needed more time to heal before she could endure a long journey, so they stayed at the cabin. Russell kept busy chopping firewood, hunting rabbits to supplement their food supplies, and maintaining constant vigilance. Zara could tell he was worried about Sela's finding them, though he tried to hide it from her. For her part, Zara focused on healing. She rested, ate the nourishing meals Russell prepared, and tried not to think about the danger they would face once they left the cabin's safety. Instead, she found herself watching Russell and learning more about him through their long conversations. She learned that he was 24 years old, 3 years older than her. She learned that his father had taught him to ride before he could walk, and that he had a gift with horses that bordered on uncanny. She learned that he loved reading but had little access to books, and that his favorite meal was his mother's apple pie. She also learned that he had never been in love. There was a girl once, Russell admitted on their second evening at the cabin. They were sitting near the fire, playing cards with a battered deck Russell had found in the cabin. Emily Sutton. I thought maybe something might happen between us, but then her family moved to Oregon and that was that. Did you love her? Zara asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Russell considered the question seriously. I don't think so. I was fond of her, but it never felt like what my parents have. They look at each other after 25 years of marriage like they're still courting. That's what I want someday. That sounds lovely, Zara said softly. What about you? Russell asked, studying his cards. Anyone special in your past? Zara shook her head. I was too focused on helping my parents when they were sick, and after they died I had to worry about keeping a roof over my head. There wasn't time for romance. You want that someday? Russell asked. Love, marriage, a family. I do, Zara admitted. I want what my parents had. They loved each other so deeply. Even when things were hard, they faced it together. That kind of partnership, that kind of devotion, it seems worth everything. Russell nodded thoughtfully. I think so too. Their eyes met across the small table, and Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She looked down at her cards quickly, her heart racing. Was she imagining the way Russell looked at her, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her, the way he found excuses to touch her hand or shoulder? The snow began falling again on the third day, heavy flakes that Russell said meant they would be trapped at the cabin for at least another day or two. Zara tried not to be glad about the delay, but she could not help feeling a sense of relief. Here in this small cabin, cut off from the world, she felt safe in a way she had not felt in months. And more than that, she was happy. She was happy watching Russell cook breakfast, his movements efficient and sure. She was happy listening to him talk about his dreams of someday having his own ranch. She was happy when he helped her walk around the cabin to keep her muscles from stiffening, his arms strong and steady around her waist. That evening, as the wind howled outside and the fire crackled cheerfully inside, Zara finally gathered the courage to speak about what was building between them. Russell, she said softly. He was sitting in his usual chair beside the bunk, and he looked up at her with those steady gray eyes. I need to tell you something. What is it? He asked, leaning forward with concern. Are you in pain? Is your shoulder bothering you? No, it's not that, Zara said. She took a deep breath, her heart hammering. The snow was still falling outside, visible through the window, and she thought how fitting it was that snow fell as she prepared to make herself vulnerable. I'm afraid, she said quietly. But not of Sela's, not right now. I'm afraid of what I'm feeling. I'm afraid that when we leave here and go to Boys City, this will end, whatever this is between us. Russell went very still. "Zara, let me finish," she said, needing to get the words out before her courage failed. "I know it's only been a few days. I know we barely know each other. But Russell, when I'm with you, I feel safe and happy and like maybe there's still good in the world. You risked everything to help me. You stayed awake all night to protect me. You've been so kind and patient, and I'm falling for you, and I'm terrified because I don't know if you feel the same way." The silence that followed her confession seemed to stretch forever. Zara could not bring herself to look at Russell's face, too afraid of what she might see there. Rejection, pity, discomfort. Then Russell stood, and in 2 steps he was beside the bunk. He knelt down so their faces were level, and when Zara finally looked at him, what she saw in his eyes took her breath away. "I'll protect you always," Russell said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just from Silas Vaughn or any other danger. I'll protect your heart too, because you've given it to me and I'm giving you mine in return." "Russell," Zara whispered, tears streaming down her face. He reached up and cupped her cheek gently, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I've been falling for you since I carried you out of that alley. Maybe even before that. All those times I saw you around town and thought you were the prettiest, kindest person I'd ever seen, but never had the courage to speak to you. These last few days with you have been the best of my life, even with all the danger and fear. Because I got to know you, the real you, and you're even more amazing than I imagined." "I was so afraid you didn't feel the same way," Zara said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I feel exactly the same way," Russell assured her. He leaned closer and Zara's breath caught. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," she breathed. His lips met hers softly, carefully, mindful of her injury. But the gentleness only made the kiss more powerful. Zara felt warmth flood through her entire body, chasing away the cold and fear that had lived inside her for so long. She brought her good hand up to touch his face, feeling the slight roughness of his stubble against her palm. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Russell rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Zara Pemberton," he said quietly. "I know it's fast and maybe I'm crazy, but I love you." "I love you too," Zara said, the words feeling right and true. "I love you, Russell Owens." They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other, the snow falling steadily outside the window. Zara felt a sense of peace settle over her that she had never experienced before. Yes, there was still danger ahead. Yes, Silas was still hunting her, but she was not alone anymore. She had Russell and he had her, and somehow that made everything feel possible. Russell finally pulled back, though he kept hold of her hand. "We should try to get some sleep. We'll need to leave as soon as the weather clears, and it's going to be a hard journey to Boys City." "Will you stay close?" Zara asked. "I sleep better when I know you're near." Russell's smile was tender. "I'll stay right here beside you, always." He settled into the chair, still holding her hand, and Zara closed her eyes, feeling happier than she had in years, despite everything. She fell asleep with a smile on her face and Russell's hand warm in hers. The weather cleared the next morning, revealing a world transformed by snow. Everything was white and pristine, the sun reflecting off the drifts with blinding brilliance. Russell woke early and went outside to assess the trail conditions. When he returned, his expression was serious. "Trail looks passable, but it's going to be slow going," he said. "How's your shoulder feeling?" Zara moved it experimentally and was pleased to find that while it was still sore, the sharp pain had dulled considerably. "Much better. I think I can manage." "We'll take it slow," Russell said. "We can't push too hard or you'll tear the stitches. But I think we need to move. I don't like staying in one place too long." They spent the morning preparing for the journey. Russell packed supplies carefully, making sure they had enough food and water for several days. He fashioned a sling for Zara's arm to help support her injured shoulder during the ride. When everything was ready, he helped her outside to where his bay gelding was waiting. "His name is Flint," Russell said as he helped Zara into the saddle. "He's steady and sure-footed. You can trust him." Russell swung up behind her, and once again, Zara found herself wrapped in his protective embrace. But this time, it felt different. This time, she knew he loved her, and the warmth of his body against her sent pleasant shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. They set off down the mountain trail slowly, Flint picking his way carefully through the snow. The journey was treacherous in places, with the trail barely visible under the white blanket. But Russell guided them with confidence, clearly familiar with this country. They rode through pristine wilderness, the only sounds the crunch of Flint's hooves in the snow and the occasional call of a bird. Zara leaned back against Russell's chest, feeling safe despite the danger she knew was still out there somewhere. "Tell me about Boys City," she said after a while. "I've never been there." "It's grown a lot in recent years," Russell said. "Must be 3,000 or 4,000 people living there now. It's the territorial capital, so there's a lot of government buildings and officials. But it's also got everything a city should have. Hotels, restaurants, shops, churches. You'll like it." "Will we be safe there?" "Safer than anywhere else," Russell said. "Silas's influence doesn't reach that far. And with the territorial marshal's office right there, we can make sure you're properly protected." They rode through the day, stopping occasionally to rest Flint and allow Zara to stretch her legs. Each time they stopped, Russell checked her bandages and made sure she was not in too much pain. His care and attention made Zara fall even more deeply in love with him. As evening approached, Russell found a sheltered spot among some rocks where they could make camp. He built a fire and prepared a simple meal, then spread out their bedrolls close to the flames. "We'll take turns keeping watch," Russell said. "I don't think Silas could have tracked us this far, but I'm not taking any chances." "I can take the first watch," Zara offered. "You barely slept the first few nights at the cabin." Russell looked like he wanted to argue, but then nodded. "Wake me in a few hours. And Zara, if you see or hear anything unusual, anything at all, you wake me immediately. Understand? I promise." Russell laid down on his bedroll, his rifle within easy reach. Within minutes, exhaustion pulled him into sleep. Zara sat by the fire, feeding it occasionally to keep the flames high, and watched the stars emerge in the clear night sky. The mountains rose around them like silent guardians, their peaks white against the darkness. Zara thought about how much her life had changed in less than a week. She had gone from being a terrified woman running for her life to being a woman in love, protected by someone who genuinely cared about her. She glanced over at Russell's sleeping form, his face peaceful in the firelight. He was everything she had ever dreamed of, but never thought she would find. Strong but gentle, brave but kind, determined but patient. He made her feel cherished and valued in a way she had never experienced before. After a few hours, Zara woke Russell as promised. He insisted on checking her shoulder again before he took over the watch, and Zara settled into her bedroll feeling warm and safe. They continued their journey the next day, making slow but steady progress westward. The landscape gradually changed as they descended from the mountains into rolling hills and then into more level terrain. The snow was less deep here, which made travel easier. On the third day after leaving the cabin, they stopped at a small trading post to replenish their supplies and get news. The proprietor, a grizzled man named Hayes, eyed them curiously but asked no questions when Russell paid in cash. "Any news from Shoshone City?" Russell asked casually as Hayes wrapped their purchases. "Heard there was some trouble there about a week back," Hayes said. "Something about a shooting and a witness gone missing." Rich fellow named Vaughn is offering a substantial reward for information about a young woman who disappeared. Russell kept his expression neutral. That's so. Yep, $500 for information leading to her recovery. Says she's a relative who ran off after a family dispute. Hayes gave them a knowing look. Course, that's his story. Who knows what the truth is? Who knows indeed, Russell agreed. He collected their supplies and helped Zara back onto Flint. As they rode away, Zara could feel tension radiating from Russell's body. $500 is a lot of money, she said quietly. Enough that someone might be tempted to turn us in. We'll be more careful from now on, Russell said. No more stops until we reach Boise City. We're only about 2 days out now. We can make it. But the encounter at the trading post had shaken them both. They rode in tense silence, Russell constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger. That night, they made a cold camp with no fire, not wanting to risk the light being seen from a distance. I'm sorry, Zara whispered as they huddled together under the blankets, trying to stay warm without the benefit of flames. I've made your life so complicated. Don't apologize, Russell said firmly. He pulled her closer, careful of her shoulder. You're not a complication. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Even though we might freeze to death out here, Zara asked, trying to inject some humor into the situation. Russell chuckled and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Even then, at least I'd die happy. They held each other through the cold night, drawing warmth and comfort from their closeness. Zara dozed fitfully, waking often to find Russell still awake and alert, watching over her. Each time she would squeeze his hand, and he would squeeze back, a silent reassurance that they were together, and they would face whatever came next as a team. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They set off early, both eager to reach the safety of Boise City. The landscape here was more populated, with farms and small homesteads dotting the valley. They passed other travelers on the road, and each time, Zara pulled her hood up to hide her face, and Russell kept his hand near his rifle. They were perhaps 10 miles from Boise City when trouble found them. They had stopped to water Flint at a small creek when Zara heard the sound of approaching horses. Russell heard it too, and his hand immediately went to his rifle. 3 riders emerged from the tree line, and Zara's heart sank when she recognized the man in the lead. Silas Vaughn sat astride a magnificent black stallion, flanked by 2 rough-looking men who were clearly hired guns. Silas was in his 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair and cold blue eyes that held no mercy. He smiled when he saw Zara, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Miss Pemberton," Silas said pleasantly, "you've led us on quite a chase." Russell moved to stand between Zara and the 3 men, his rifle held ready. "Ride away, Vaughn, you're not taking her." "Brave words from a cowboy with 1 gun against 3, Silas said. He turned his attention back to Zara. "This doesn't have to end badly, Miss Pemberton. Come with me now, and I'll let your friend ride away unharmed." "You're a liar," Zara said, her voice shaking but firm. "You'll kill us both." "Perhaps," Silas agreed with a shrug. "But at least this way the cowboy has a chance. Refuse, and I'll have my men shoot him where he stands, and you'll watch him die before I take you anyway." Russell's grip tightened on his rifle. Zara could see him calculating odds, looking for an advantage. But they were in an open space with no cover, outnumbered and outgunned. "Let her go, Silas," Russell said. "This is between you and the law. She's just a witness doing her duty." "Her duty is going to put a noose around my neck," Silas said, his pleasant facade cracking to reveal the anger beneath. "I'm not going to let that happen. Killing her will only make things worse," Russell argued. "The marshal already knows everything. He has Jack Morrison's body and he's investigating. Killing Zara won't save you." Maybe not, Silas said, but it will sure make me feel better. Now, Miss Pemberton, step away from the cowboy or I'll have my men start shooting. The two hired guns raised their rifles, aiming directly at Russell. Zara felt panic claw at her throat. She could not let Russell die because of her. She took a step forward, but Russell's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "Don't," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Sela's. "Zara, stay behind me." "I won't let them kill you," she said desperately. "And I won't let them take you," Russell replied. "I made you a promise, remember? I'll protect you always." "How touching," Silas drawled. "I'm going to count to 3 and then my men start shooting. 1. Zara's mind raced, trying to think of something, anything they could do. But they were trapped with no way out. 2. Russell raised his rifle, aiming at Silas. Zara knew he could probably get one shot off before the hired guns killed him, but that would not save them. Before Silas could say 3, the sharp crack of rifle fire split the air. But it was not from any of the 5 people at the creek. One of the hired guns jerked and fell from his horse, blood blooming on his shoulder. Another shot rang out, and the second hired gun's horse reared in panic, throwing its rider. Silas's head whipped around, trying to locate the shooter. Russell did not waste the opportunity. He lunged forward and yanked Silas from his horse, the 2 men going down in a tangle of limbs. Flint, trained for cattle work, immediately moved to block Zara, protecting her with his bulk. More riders emerged from the trees, and Zara's heart leaped when she saw the glint of martial badges. There were 4 of them, all with rifles trained on Silas's men. The hired gun who had been shot sat clutching his shoulder and making no move to fight. The one who had been thrown from his horse slowly raised his hands in surrender. Russell had Silas pinned face down in the dirt, his knee in the man's back and his rifle pressed against Silas's neck. "Don't move," Russell growled. The lead marshal dismounted and walked over. He was a tall man with a weathered face and sharp eyes. "Russell Owens?" he asked. "That's me," Russell confirmed, not easing his grip on Silas. "I'm Marshal Thomas Garrett," the man said. "We've been tracking Vaughn for the last 2 days. Got a tip from a trading post proprietor that he was heading this way, looking for someone. When we saw what was about to happen here, we figured we should intervene." "I'm grateful you did," Russell said with feeling. Marshal Garrett gestured to one of his deputies, who came forward with shackles. Russell moved aside and they secured Silas's wrists behind his back. The marshal hauled Silas to his feet and the older man glared at Zara with pure hatred. "This isn't over," Silas spat. "Yeah, it is," Marshal Garrett said calmly. He turned to Zara. "Miss Pemberton, I presume. We've been looking for you. Heard you disappeared from Shoshone City under suspicious circumstances." "Silas tried to kill me," Zara said. "Russell saved my life." "We'll need full statements from both of you," the marshal said. "But first, let's get you to Boys City. You'll be safe there while we sort all this out." The journey to Boys City was surreal. They rode in the company of the marshals, with Silas and his 2 hired men shackled and subdued. Zara kept waiting for something else to go wrong, for some new danger to emerge, but nothing happened. The marshals were professional and courteous, and by the time the buildings of Boys City appeared on the horizon, Zara was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was finally over. Marshal Garrett took them directly to the territorial marshal's office, a solid brick building near the center of town. They spent hours giving their statements, going over every detail of what had happened from the day Zara witnessed the murder to the confrontation at the creek. "We have enough to hang Vaughn twice over," Marshal Garrett said with satisfaction when they were finished. "Murder, attempted murder, witness intimidation. He's going away for good, Miss Pemberton. You don't need to fear him anymore." Zara felt tears of relief stream down her face. Russell, who had been sitting beside her throughout the entire interview, pulled her into his arms. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe now. It's really over." "Thank you," Zara whispered. "Thank you for everything." Marshal Garrett cleared his throat. "You'll need to stay in Boise City until the trial, which should be in about 6 weeks. We'll provide you with a safe place to stay and protection if needed, though I doubt Vaughn has any other associates willing to come after you now." "What about Russell?" Zara asked. "He saved my life. He protected me when no one else would." "From what you've both told me, he's a hero," the marshal said, "and you're free to stay together if that's what you want. I can recommend a good boarding house that would be appropriate for an unmarried couple to stay at, with separate rooms, of course." Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she nodded. She was not ready to be apart from Russell, not yet. Maybe not ever. The marshal arranged for them to stay at a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. She was a kind woman in her 50s who asked no prying questions and showed them to their rooms, which were across the hall from each other on the 2nd floor. After she left them alone, Russell and Zara stood in the hallway, suddenly uncertain. So much had happened so fast. They had confessed their love in the wilderness under desperate circumstances, but now they were back in civilization with all its rules and expectations. "I should let you rest," Russell said, though he made no move to leave. "You've been through so much." "Will you stay?" Zara asked softly. "Just for a little while. I'm not ready to be alone yet." Russell nodded and followed her into her room. It was simple but clean, with a comfortable bed, a washstand, and a chair by the window. They sat together on the bed, not quite touching but close enough that Zara could feel his warmth. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you testify at the trial and help put Silas Vaughn away for good," Russell said. "And after that you're free to live your life however you want." "What do you want?" Zara asked, turning to look at him. "For your life, I mean." Russell met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I want you," he said simply. "I want to court you properly, the way you deserve. I want to take you to church socials and buy you dinner and ask your permission to hold your hand. I want to do this right, Zara." "We're a bit past all that, don't you think?" Zara said with a small smile. "You've already seen me at my worst. You've held me while I cried and tended my wounds and slept beside me." "All the more reason to do the rest of it properly," Russell insisted. "I want to give you everything you deserve. Courtship, romance, a proper proposal. I want people to see us together and know that I cherish you, that you're the most important person in my world." Zara felt her eyes fill with tears again, but these were happy tears. "I would like that," she said softly. Russell smiled and gently took her hand. "Then that's what we'll do. I'll court you, Zara Pemberton, and I'll do my best to make you the happiest woman in Idaho Territory." "You already do," Zara said. She leaned forward and kissed him softly, and he responded with the same gentleness and care he had shown her from the beginning. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation for the trial and, more pleasantly, Russell's dedicated courtship. He kept his promise to do things properly. He called on her every day at the boarding house, always at appropriate hours and always with Mrs. Fletcher's knowledge. He took her to dinner at Boise City's finest restaurant, walked with her through the town's streets, and accompanied her to Sunday services at the Methodist Church. He was attentive and romantic, bringing her flowers and small gifts, complimenting her sincerely, and treating her with a respect and devotion that made her fall more deeply in love with him every day. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds as thoroughly as they had learned each other's hearts during their desperate flight from Silas. Russell found work at a livery stable in town, refusing to let Zara support herself alone even though the marshal's office had provided her with a small stipend for her cooperation. He was determined to prove he could provide for her, and Zara loved him all the more for it. The trial finally arrived in early February. Zara was nervous, but Russell was with her every moment he was allowed to be, providing silent strength and support. She testified clearly and truthfully about everything she had witnessed, and with her testimony, Marshall Garrett's evidence, and several other witnesses who came forward once they knew Silas was in custody, the jury took less than 2 hours to return a guilty verdict. Silas Vaughn was sentenced to hang for the murder of Jack Morrison and the attempted murder of Zara Pemberton. As they led him from the courtroom, he cast one last venomous look at Zara, but she did not flinch. Russell's arm was around her, and she knew she was safe. After the trial, they walked out of the courthouse into the bright winter sunshine. Zara took a deep breath, feeling like she was breathing freely for the first time in months. "What do you want to do now?" Russell asked. "You're finally free to make your own choices without fear." Zara turned to look at him, this man who had risked everything for her, who had protected her and loved her and stood beside her through the darkest time of her life. She knew exactly what she wanted. "I want to build a life with you," she said, "if you'll have me." Russell's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He went down on one knee right there on the courthouse steps, heedless of the people passing by. He took her hand in his and looked up at her with such love that it took her breath away. "Zara Pemberton," he said, his voice clear and strong, "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You're brave and kind and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you every single day. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Zara said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Russell, I'll marry you." Russell stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly to the applause and cheers of the strangers around them. Zara laughed and cried and held him tight, knowing that she had found something precious and rare, something worth all the fear and pain that had led her to this moment. They were married 3 weeks later in the Methodist Church, with Marshall Garrett and Mrs. Fletcher serving as witnesses. Zara wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself, and Russell wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed and his face shining with happiness. After the ceremony, they had a small celebration at Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. The marshal and several of the deputies attended, along with some of the friends they had made during their time in Boise City. It was not a grand affair, but it was filled with warmth and joy and love. That night, in the room they would now share as husband and wife, Russell held Zara close and whispered, "I'll protect you always. I meant that, you know, every word." "I know," Zara said softly, "and I'll love you always, that's my promise to you." They made love for the first time as husband and wife, tender and passionate and full of the love they had declared to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking quietly about their future. "I've been saving money," Russell said, "and I have some put away from my years working at the Double J. It's not much, but it's a start. I want to buy us some land, Zara, build us a ranch of our own." "That sounds wonderful," Zara said, running her fingers through his hair. "Where would we go?" "I've heard the land near Mountain Home is good for ranching," Russell said. "It's about 50 miles southeast of here. Good water, decent grazing. We could start small, maybe 20 head of cattle, and build from there." "I could take in sewing work," Zara offered. "Help contribute." "You wouldn't have to," Russell said. "I can provide for us." "I know you can," Zara said, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. "But I want to be your partner in this, Russell. We build our life together, both of us contributing, both of us working toward our dreams." Russell smiled and pulled her down for a kiss. "Partners," he agreed. "In everything." They stayed in Boise City for another month, working and saving money. Russell took on extra jobs and Zara did sewing and alterations for the town's ladies. Marshall Garrett helped Russell find a good deal on 25 head of young cattle from a rancher who was retiring, and they began making plans in earnest. In late March, with spring beginning to green the landscape, they loaded their possessions into a wagon Russell had purchased and set off for Mountain Home. The journey took 2 days, and they camped under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms and dreaming of the future. The land they had purchased was beautiful, a valley with a creek running through it and mountains rising in the distance. There was a small cabin already on the property, weathered but sound, and Russell immediately began making plans for improvements and expansion. Those first years were hard. They worked from sunrise to sunset, building their herd, improving their land and creating a home. But they were happy years too, filled with the satisfaction of watching their dreams take shape. Zara proved to be a natural rancher's wife. She learned to ride, to help with the cattle, to handle a rifle when predators threatened their stock. She also established a reputation in the nearby town for her beautiful needlework, and the extra income helped them through the lean times. Russell was everything he had promised to be. He cherished Zara, protected her, and loved her with a devotion that never wavered. They faced droughts and hard winters, lost cattle to disease and predators, struggled with money and exhaustion. But they faced it all together, their love growing stronger with each challenge overcome. In the spring of 1883, Zara discovered she was pregnant. Russell was overjoyed, his hands gentle as he placed them on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Zara asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Russell said. He kissed her softly. "Thank you, Zara. Thank you for this, for everything." Their son was born in December of that year, a healthy baby with Russell's gray eyes and Zara's dark hair. They named him James Russell Owens, and Russell cried when he held his son for the first time. "I'm going to be a good father," Russell promised, looking down at the tiny bundle in his arms. "I'm going to teach him to be kind and brave and to stand up for what's right." "I know you will," Zara said, exhausted but happy. "You're going to be wonderful." Russell was indeed a wonderful father. He doted on James, carrying him around the ranch even when the baby was too small to see much beyond his father's face. As James grew, Russell taught him everything he knew about ranching, horses, and integrity. 2 years later, they had a daughter, whom they named Sarah Elizabeth. She had Zara's features and Russell's adventurous spirit, and she kept them both running from the moment she learned to walk. The years passed, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children's growth. Their herd grew to over 200 head, and Russell built a larger house to accommodate their expanding family. Zara's sewing business flourished, and she took great pride in being able to contribute to their prosperity. In 1888, they had another son whom they named Thomas, after Marshall Garrett, who had become a good friend over the years. The Marshall had moved on from Boys City, but still wrote to them regularly, and he traveled to Mountain Home to meet his namesake. "You two have built something remarkable here," Marshall Garrett said as they sat on the porch of the Owens home, watching the children play in the yard while the sun set over the mountains. "A good life, a strong family, you should be proud." "We are," Russell said, his arm around Zara's shoulders. "Every day I'm grateful for what we have." "I never did properly thank you," the marshal said. "If you hadn't protected Miss Pemberton, we might never have gotten Vaughn. He would have killed her and gone on to hurt who knows how many other people." "I didn't do it for thanks," Russell said. "I did it because it was right, and because the moment I saw her, I knew she was special." Zara leaned into Russell's embrace, remembering that snowy day in Shoshone City when her life had changed forever. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, those desperate days of fear and flight. But she would not change any of it, because it had led her to Russell, to this life, to the happiness she had never dared to dream was possible. The children grew. James became a skilled horseman and took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch as Russell's back began to trouble him in his 40s. Sarah married a good man from town, a shopkeeper's son named Daniel, and they settled nearby. Thomas showed an aptitude for numbers and went away to school in Boise City, planning to return and help manage the business side of the ranch. Through it all, Russell and Zara's love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, had faced hardship and loss, had celebrated triumphs and joys. And through it all, they had held fast to each other. On a snowy evening in December of 1905, Russell and Zara sat together on their porch, wrapped in blankets and watching the snow fall. They were both in their late 40s now, their hair touched with gray, their faces lined with age and experience. But when Russell looked at Zara, he still saw the beautiful young woman he had saved in that Shoshone City alley over 20 years ago. "You remember the night at the line shack?" Zara asked softly, watching the snow drift down. "When I told you I was afraid and you promised to protect me always." "I remember," Russell said, pulling her closer. "I meant every word of that promise." "I know you did," Zara said. "You've kept it every day of our marriage. You've protected me, cherished me, loved me in ways I never imagined possible." "You saved me too, you know," Russell said. "Before I met you, I was just going through the motions of life, working, existing, but not really living. You gave me purpose, Zara. You gave me a reason to be better, to do more, to build something meaningful." Zara turned to look at him, tears shining in her eyes. "I love you, Russell Owens. I have loved you from that first moment, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you, Zara Owens," Russell said, kissing her softly. "Always and forever." They sat together in the falling snow, surrounded by the ranch they had built and the life they had created, and they were content. The fears Zara had confessed on that long-ago snowy night had long since been vanquished, replaced by the certainty of Russell's love and protection. And Russell had found in Zara not just someone to protect, but a true partner, a love that had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren laughing as Sarah and Daniel had brought their 3 children to visit for the holidays. James and his wife were coming tomorrow with their new baby. Thomas would arrive next week, having graduated from business school with honors. The house would be full of noise and love and family, just as they had always dreamed. "We've had a good life," Zara said softly. "The best," Russell agreed. "And it's not over yet. We still have years ahead of us, years to watch our grandchildren grow, to see what adventures life has in store." "Whatever comes, we'll face it together," Zara said. "Together," Russell echoed, and he kissed her again as the snow continued to fall. A soft blanket covering their ranch, their home, their life. The years that followed were indeed good ones. Russell and Zara saw their children prosper and their grandchildren grow. They celebrated births and weddings, mourned losses, and continued to work their ranch, though they gradually turned over more responsibility to James and his family. They grew old together, their steps slower but their love undiminished. On warm summer evenings, they would still sit on their porch, holding hands and remembering the wild days of their youth when fate and circumstance had brought them together in that snowy Idaho town. Russell never forgot his promise. Even as an old man, he looked out for Zara, protecting her from the small dangers of advancing age. making sure she was comfortable and happy. And Zara continued to love him with the same fierce devotion she had felt from the beginning, grateful every day for the man who had saved her life and given her a future she never could have imagined. When Russell Owens finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, with Zara holding his hand, his last words were the same promise he had made over 50 years earlier in that mountain-lined shack. "I'll protect you always." Zara lived for 5 more years after Russell's death, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She never remarried, never even considered it. Russell had been the love of her life, her partner, her protector, and no one could ever take his place. When Zara finally joined Russell in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking their ranch, her family laid her to rest beside him. On her headstone, they inscribed the words she had said to Russell on their wedding night: "I'll love you always." The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the Owens family. James's children and grandchildren worked the land, raised cattle, and kept alive the story of Russell and Zara, the cowboy and the woman he saved, whose love had built not just a ranch but a legacy of courage, devotion, and enduring love. And on winter nights, when the snow fell softly over the Idaho Valley, covering the land in white, the family would gather by the fire and tell the story of how it all began. They would speak of a desperate young woman fleeing for her life, of a brave cowboy who risked everything to protect her, of a promise made in a mountain cabin as the snow fell outside. They would tell of how Zara confessed her fears on that snowy night, and how Russell had said, "I'll protect you always," and had kept that promise every day for the rest of his life. It was a story of love born in danger and adversity, tempered by hardship and strengthened by time. It was a story of 2 people who found each other when they needed each other most, and built a life together that became the foundation for generations to come. The snow fell as she confessed her fears, and the cowboy said he would protect her always. And he did. And they lived and loved and built a beautiful life together. And that, as their descendants would always say with pride and love, was how the Owens family legacy began. The ranch house still stood, over a century later, carefully preserved by the family who continued to live there and work the land. Visitors would sometimes come, drawn by the story, and they would walk through the rooms where Russell and Zara had raised their children, see the porch where they had sat together in their old age, visit the cemetery where they rested side by side. And on those rare occasions when snow fell in that Idaho valley, blanketing the land in white just as it had on that fateful December day in 1881, people would pause and remember. They would think of the young woman who had been brave enough to speak the truth despite her fear, and of the cowboy who had been brave enough to stand beside her. They would think of the love that had transformed 2 lives and created a legacy that endured long after both lovers had passed from this world. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West when the land was still rough and unsettled, when survival was not guaranteed and danger lurked around every corner. But it was also a timeless story, one that spoke to the fundamental human need for connection, for protection, for love that endures through every trial and tribulation. Snow fell as she confessed her fears. The cowboy said, "I'll protect you always." And in keeping that simple, powerful promise, Russell and Zara Owens created something eternal, something that would inspire and comfort their descendants for generations to come. They proved that even in the darkest, most frightening moments, love could bloom and grow and become something strong enough to weather any storm. Their story was complete, a perfect circle from that desperate beginning to the peaceful end. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that went far beyond the land they had worked or the children they had raised. They had left behind an example of what it meant to truly commit to another person, to honor promises made, to build a life together based on respect, trust, and unwavering devotion. And so their story ended not with sadness, but with celebration. Celebration of a life well lived, a love well earned, a promise well kept. The snow might fall, covering their graves as it had fallen on that night when they first confessed their love, but the warmth of what they had created together continued to burn bright in the hearts of all who knew their story. It was, quite simply, a perfect love story, and it had reached its perfect conclusion with both Russell and Zara having lived long, happy lives surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured. There were no loose ends, no unanswered questions, no lingering doubts. There was only the certainty that two people had found each other against all odds, had loved each other completely, and had built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. The Owens family continued to thrive, generation after generation, each one adding their own chapter to the story while never forgetting the foundation that Russell and Zara had laid. The ranch prospered, adapting to changing times while maintaining the core values of hard work, integrity, and family that Russell and Zara had instilled from the beginning. And whenever family gathered, whenever they faced their own challenges and fears, they would remember the story of Russell and Zara. They would remember that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it with someone you trusted by your side. They would remember that true love was not just passion and romance, but partnership and commitment, and the daily choice to honor and cherish the person you had pledged your life to. The story of Snow fell as she confessed her fears, and the cowboy said, "I'll protect you always," became more than just family history. It became a touchstone, a reminder, a beacon guiding each new generation toward the kind of love and life worth fighting for. And in that way, Russell and Zara's love never truly ended. It lived on, eternal and unchanging, a testament to the power of love to transform lives and create legacies that span the ages. And so, as the snow continued to fall softly over the Idaho Valley, covering the land where Russell and Zara had built their dreams, their story reached its true and final ending. Not in death, but in the immortality of love remembered, honored, and passed down through the generations. Their love had come full circle from that first snowy confession to the final peaceful rest, and in between, they had lived a life that truly mattered. It was finished. Their story was complete, and it was beautiful.